Welcome everyone, and this is Desi Vijay. I'm a North-South National Team member and a coordinator for webinars. Hope you're all doing great during this holiday season. I'm glad to see you all here today. Today we are bringing in an important topic about helping your younger generation to assimilate in this society. This is one of the topics which is very near and dear to our heart. That's bridging the generation gap. This is the sixth session of the series. You can watch all our previous sessions in our North South YouTube channel. We're really pleased to have very active member of our BGG team to talk to you and share his experience growing up here. I'm really glad that you're able to make this happen today. Welcome to yet another exciting webinar session. Some of the past webinars are also available, as I said, in the North South YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the channel and watch them at your leisure. Our main program, racial bullying faced by Indian children and reclaiming one's identity. We have a special vocal youngster amongst us to talk to us about his experience and share with us. Let's go to the program. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome Shivam. He's no strangers to us, having participated in our earlier webinars on bridging the gap topic earlier, and an active and a passionate member of our team focused on this topic. He's a computational biologist at Massachusetts General Hospital who has experience with the recovery from the complex post-traumatic stress disorder and sharing his lessons learned with others. And he has been vocal all through, and he is also now trying to pursue a PhD in this area. He is passionate about helping Indian diaspora find peace within the family unit and preventing childhood trauma by improving relationships between the parents and the children. We are also really glad to have him here to presenting at today's session. We also have Dr. Unnati Jain, who spoke to us before on Gen Z kids assimilating in this country, with us today to help us out with your Q&A and give her opinion also. So let me join you in warmly welcoming Shivam. Shivam.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. This is something I'm very passionate about because I am an Indian man and I have grown up in this country, and it's been very difficult. I've dealt with a lot of challenges, and I'm pretty happy with how I've overcome a lot of them too. And you know, through the years, as I've dealt with these problems, I've talked to a lot of other Indian men, and more I find that I have like younger Indian men coming in trying to talk to me about some of these challenges. So I thought, you know, maybe I can share some of my my observations. And more than anything else, I want to emphasize that we as men get to decide who we are individually. There are so many pressures on who we should be, both from family and from culture, that are constantly almost at war with who we are internally. And it's really just about understanding who you are and having parents learn to mirror and help their children individuate so that they can become healthy. Because at the end of the day, we really want that emotional health. So my story goes back to the town I grew up in. There were a fair amount of Indian kids in my town, but most of them belonged to one family. So that was the Patel family, and I'm Gandhi, so I felt kind of left out in that sense, and it was very difficult. I think elementary school was fine. I had a good time there, but once I got to 6th grade, that's when things really got bad. I think what happens is when we're young, we rely on our parents for our primary image. We rely on them for validation and understanding who we are. But there's a shift that happens once we enter middle school and high school where we start to really rely on our peers. Other things go into the mix during middle school, such as dating. And then I guess dating is a whole can of worms in of itself. And one of the big messages I got regarding dating from very early on is that Indian men are not desirable. And I know dating is often a taboo topic within Indian families, but it's really something that I think the Indian community should talk about more because it leads to all kinds of dysfunctions. So very early on, there was a social hierarchy. It was white jocks, tall white jocks were at the absolute top. And I'm a short, nerdy Indian guy. So you know where that leaves me. I really liked math and physics, science pretty early on. And I was ahead of my peers in terms of math. So they already view me as an alien. So that really led to a lot of struggles regarding relating to other kids. I remember I would Google WikiHow, how to be popular, how to be funny, things like that. It was really sad actually, and I didn't have much support at home, unfortunately. And that's around the time when the racial part really started getting integrated. And I have a couple of stories that I have two stories that really um, kind of nail how painful this racial hierarchy is. So there was a student in my sixth grade class, and he was a immigrant from Rwanda, and he didn't know anybody the first few days. And I wanted to be friends with him. I think very early on, I had this desire to like help out people who might not have as many friends, probably because I could relate to them. So I became good friends with him. But it turned out he was good at soccer. And the moment that happened, he joined the soccer team, started hanging out with the soccer players, and I was left in the dust. But the worst part is this. I remember I was walking out of school one day and I see that friend and he's with this other soccer player. And this other guy, you know, white guy, he's not the nicest person. And he says to this guy, the Rwandan immigrant, Shiv, that sounds a lot like shit. So that's something that happened when I was in middle school. So these are the kinds of experiences that I had early on. Other stories include, I remember in high school, a mosque was vandalized by these two white students in our town. But the hardest thing was that there were Indian people who were friends with these white guys, and that felt almost like a racial betrayal because they vandalized a mosque. They're clearly racist. Like they vandalized the mosque and wrote "Go home," and they like wrote USA on it, and still an Indian person wanted to be friends with them. And that's the sad thing. A lot of Indian people really try and be white, and to the detriment of their own, like who they are as in terms of their own racial identity. Um, like it's really painful. So these are two very, I guess, almost violent instances, but there was much more passive things that happened. Um, like Indian people who were from India, actual immigrants, if you had the accent, you were almost seen as a different species. I remember in high school, we would be waiting for the bus, and there was this one guy who was an immigrant from India, and he was just so lonely. And I would try and talk to him, and I felt so sad for him. But you know, the Indian accent gets mocked so much, and it's no wonder, unfortunately. So there was a very clear social hierarchy, and from that came a lot of bullying. And Dr. Jane, feel free to chime in whenever you hear something.
Yes, I think I'm going to ask a counter question here, and just for the audience's clarity, Shivam, why do you think you made a very strong point that Indian people want to be white?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really a problem in this country. And where do you think that stems from? I see a lot of kids. I'm a life coach, and I see a lot of kids who want to who pretend to be white because they want to fit in.
Yeah.
Right? And I think inherently there is an inherent problem there, other than them trying to fit in. And what do you think that problem is? And maybe we can talk a little bit about it.
Inherent problem other than trying to fit in. I think in some ways almost rebellion against the parents. Because if you have the culture forced on you, where do you go? Like nobody likes being forced. Like if you force something on a kid, it's only a short-term solution, and it'll come back and bite you in a much worse way in the long run.
I so agree with you. And this is for all the parents out there. I think it's very important for our children to be themselves and let them come back and embrace the culture rather than pushing them to do things because you want them to do. And that's when they try and run away from exactly what you're trying to get them to be. And they want to be white and they want to fit in the society and they become like them. Versus if we were to kind of let them be who they were and not judge them and not compare them to other kids, I think we will get the outcome that we as parents are looking for, which is to embrace the Indian culture and not try and fit in and be somebody else that they're not.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I want to move on to what happens afterwards, and it's bullying, unfortunately. And that bullying is almost like this external pressure because you don't fit in with what the ideal image is. You deserve to get bullied. It's very, and unfortunately, when you create that sort of hierarchy, that sort of external like ideal image, people will start attacking people below them so they can appear closer to it. It's this like value, it's this ranking system, and it's really awful. And bullying, I think it happens very differently between men and women. I've talked a little bit to my sister about it, and it's much more social. But with men, because aggression is so deeply tied with being a man, and unfortunately, as a society, we haven't really gotten a proper grasp of these violent drives, especially that exist amongst men. It really, like some of the ugliest violence happens with this sort of schoolyard bullying. Unfortunately, it happened to me. There were instances where I was just knocked down. People would like hit me in the back of the head. I was spat on and had things thrown at me. Somebody like pretty much let their dog attack me and didn't care. So it was pretty bad. And the long-term result was that I felt like around white people, I would tense up, I would brace up because I was ready for some sort of violence to happen. And that happened even as recent as last year, like this sort of tension, because I'm honestly like kind of scared of like random white people I don't know.
So if I may ask you, just because Shivam, we have a lot of college kids over here and high school kids, maybe it'll give them a little bit of clarity as to what have you learned through these experiences of bullying, and how do you think one can handle it better as they go out into the world, especially in college life, from high school to college life? Because in the first year, I think there is a little bit of some of that. I wouldn't call it, I don't know if I'd call it bullying, but I would call it some bit of killing each other's self-esteem and showing that they're better than the others and stuff like that. So how do you think college kids can handle it? How did you handle it? What are your learnings?
I think college was nice in that I got to choose who I hung out with. And actually, one of the sad parts about being bullied is that you end up kind of going back to people who are bullies. And I hung out with people who were bullies, and I had to learn kind of the hard way that like these are not good people. And I'll talk about that later. But you really do get
and it took you a while to realize that, is it?
Huh?
It took you a while to realize not to hang out with those people. Why did you go back?
Oh yeah, I mean, I hung out with these kinds of people. So most of it came because I was insecure about dating. And there are these things called the dark triad personality traits, which are Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and narcissism. And unfortunately, there are studies showing that these kinds of people actually have a lot of short-term dating success. And you know, I'm an Indian guy. My parents didn't teach me anything about dating, and I didn't know what the heck to do. So I was like, well, these guys, like girls seem to like these guys, so I'll talk to them. And what at first it was, and then I also had really bad self-esteem. So it's like, oh, these guys choose to hang out with me. That's so cool. But what I slowly realized is like, these people don't know how to maintain relationships. And I felt bad around them. And I started to actually get into fights with these people as I learned to kind of like get my own fangs. So it's why it took some time. And now I have like a sixth sense for these kinds of people, and I punt them out of my life immediately.
Yeah, so if I may add over here for all of our audiences, parents as well as youngsters, very important for us as we go to college to draw our boundaries, as Shivam says. We need to draw our boundaries, identify who are we hanging out with, because all of this stems from low self-worth. And to understand who we are, and I know it's very easy to get carried away in college and say, because you're so alone, you want to hang out with the wrong people. but just to understand who you are, what your self-worth is. And if parents at home can talk to their children about it a little more, to give them that strength and that ability to believe in themselves, I think we can save ourselves from a lot of this trouble. Do you agree, Shivam?
Yeah. So I talked about bullying, but then microaggressions are also a thing, and I think I used to not think about them so much, but now I realize that they've really shaped how I interact with white people. Like one thing is just teachers just assume that white culture is the default, and Indian people are out of the loop. I remember one time I went to India. I came back in the 7th grade, and they were talking about Moses. I was like, "Who's Moses?" And they all just look at me like, "What's wrong with you?" Like, of course I don't know who Moses is. I'm not Christian or Jewish. Like, and then other people just making assumptions about my family. Like this one guy who would frequently pick on me said, like, "Oh, your dad is probably a pharmacist who makes 100K." Says that out loud to the entire classroom. Nobody bats an eyelid. So this is what happens in middle and high school. And unfortunately, it causes a lot of conflicts with being Indian, because there's a conflict between the ideal image outlined by American society and what your parents want you to be. I had a lot of challenges with my parents, and I think they didn't really understand what I was going through in school. What I really needed at home was a safe environment, because every day I'd go out and I'd feel like my self-esteem was being battered. But unfortunately, I had a lot of like abuse in my house, unfortunately. One of the big things that happened was that my parents really didn't want me to date. Um, and they would go through and check my phone to make sure I'm not talking to any girls. And they had very strict racial conditions for dating too. Um, and then the second thing that happened was intense competition with other kids, especially Indian kids. So, at school, it's like, oh, all the Indian kids are just competing with each other. So this leads to some pretty, it leads into that stereotypical idea of like Indian men don't know how to talk to girls. And then also that like we're very academically competitive. I think the Indian population is academically successful for sure. But that intense competition is pretty counterproductive when you're trying to actually learn to form bonds with people at school. So
I think I'll highlight just one point, Shivam, I'm sorry to interrupt, over here, just about that intense competition. Where does it stem from? I think one, it's cultural, and B, it stems from the Indian homes, because we are so, when we make our kids competitive, because we're constantly comparing them to other kids who are doing better than them. And that's our way of motivation. It's very cultural. I don't think it's person to person. I think it's very cultural. But that actually has a counter effect on the child. When you compare the child to another child, thinking that you're motivating the child, you're actually not doing that. You're killing the child's motivation. And they reach a point where they say, okay, I don't want to deal with this. I'm okay just the way I am. And they lose their motivation. So just to keep that in mind, on Shivam's point, that it's the competition, it becomes so intense that it actually kills your self-esteem when you go out. So just to be careful about that. Thank you, Shivam.
Exactly, yeah. Especially as a man, like, you're constantly comparing yourselves. Like, do I have bigger muscles? Do I make more money and things like that? Am I taller? And it just, like, I've really had an issue of comparing myself to other men in that way. And that's because my default when I see other people is like competition, and it sucks. I hate it.
And you can't cry. You're a man. You can't cry. You're a boy.
Yeah.
You gotta have big muscles.
Yeah,
you can't do certain
luckily
things.
I'm somebody who cries a lot. I cried this
I know,
week.
right?
So I've had to
I tell my son, I'm like, the one thing that you do is you express your emotions. It's all right for boys to cry. They're humans. We don't have to give that image of macho boys and feather girls. We don't have to do that. Boys need to cry and express their emotions, because that's what happens when we grow up in the society. We grow up and get married and have relationships, and we don't know how to express emotions, which is why relationships fail. So encourage your children to express emotions, whether boys or girls.
Yeah, exactly. Some more stuff related to the relationship to being Indian. Unfortunately, I've been guilty of using my Indian parents as a joke, and it's something I look back on with some level of shame, or not shame, guilt. I haven't had the best relationship with my parents, but they're immigrants and they're struggling. Using the Indian accent to make white people laugh, and it's really sad when you develop that sort of self-hatred because you just want to fit in. And in terms of dating, this really happens where it's almost like the Indian community's infighting. Like Indian men will put down Indian women, say like, oh yeah, they're hairy or something like that. And then a lot of Indian women will put down Indian men and say like, yeah, they're controlling and like really just everybody's trying to kiss up to Whitey. It sucks. Like, why are we infighting? Like, we're all getting hurt. This is dumb. So I think
Change begins with you. We need more Shivams out there. Change begins with you. It's with every kid to stand up and say, look, I don't stand for this. This is something that I don't stand for, just like you are, right? We need more of that.
Yeah. So this is painting an unfortunately sad picture of my grade school years, and that's mostly how I look at it, honestly. Like it was a bad time in my life, and there were a lot of downstream negative effects, and some of these are really, I guess, very male-centered. So one thing that happens amongst a lot of Indian men is addiction to porn, and with like Indian families are often very closed off sexually, and unfortunately becomes such a shameful thing. And a lot of men end up just using a lot of porn, and it kills their ability to relate to women.
And I have a story here, Shivam, which I'd like to share.
Yeah, sure.
Which is very sad. And this is to every parent out here. I am a life coach, and I coach teenagers and millennials, anyone between 12 to 30 years of age. And I have a lot of teenagers who come to me. And the one thing that I also coach on is sexual education. And while I was having a coaching, there was this kid, and I was having a coaching session with the parents separately and teenagers separately. And I asked the parents, have you had the sex conversation with the child? Because he's 16 years of age, 16 and a half. Have you had it? And they said no. So we went back and forth for 6 months, but the parents refused to have the sex conversation with the child. And I asked the child, I said, do you want to have the sex education with your dad or your mom? He says, no, I'd rather have it with you than have it with them, which was actually a very sad place to be in. Because I think it's very important for your child, for you to have that conversation with your child to keep them safe. Because otherwise, what you're doing is you're allowing their mind to be molded by what the world is going to tell them. We don't know whether that's going to be right or wrong. So to keep them safe is one, to know what they're going outside and doing so that they feel comfortable coming and telling you, because sex is such a taboo topic in our culture that we don't talk about it. And when we don't talk about it, our children learn the wrong things and they close themselves off sexually and they don't want to talk about it. And then they go and do wrong things, right? So I think it's very important for every parent to have that conversation, to break that wall so that as they grow up, if God forbid they get into trouble, which at some point in time, I think every child does, they're able to come back and talk to you. And of course, they don't get addiction to porn, which is again limiting their potential because they're addicting themselves to something because they can't talk about it. Correct, Shivam? Please add or correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's exactly it. Like, there's just so many guys who don't know how to talk to women, and they get into such a shameful place, and it becomes this very bad spiral. And the sad part is there are a lot of snake oil salesmen there to prey on sexually frustrated men. There are so many snake oil salesmen, and I've fallen prey to some of them in the past, and I'm lucky that I'm no longer in that. And there are a lot of things that I guess I'll talk about this afterwards, but learning empathy for women. So I'll talk about that in a bit. So there's that type of addiction. An addiction that I've struggled with a lot is video game addiction. I had to dissociate from how bad I felt, and I would use video games as ways to do that. And I often use video games to numb my emotions, and I've luckily worked through a lot of it. It's something that still I do struggle with at times, especially if I'm feeling bad. So another downstream effect is that you just have so much anger and anxiety in general interactions. I really thought I had to be a tough guy, that any small insecurity people are going to pick out. And internally, I felt like a scared little boy, but people would always be like, "Oh yeah, Shiv is really masculine." Like, and it's it's just not a good place to be. Like, you know, you get that the small hits of external validation, but you're just putting up this shell, you're bracing all the time, and it's really painful. And honestly, I feel like more of a man now, like that I don't care about it so much. I guess I don't really care so much about being a man, and that's the nice thing about it. And all these things
And
are really,
talking about it, Shivam, this is being a man. I think what you're doing right now is a very brave thing to do, right?
no,
I
thank you.
think this is being a man rather than hiding behind your emotions. So more power to you.
Thank you. Yeah. And you know, this is all grade school, and when I entered college, I finally had a time to be free. But freshman year, I just fell into a deep depression because I didn't know how to relate to people. I felt that there was something wrong with me because I couldn't go on dates and stuff, and you know, I was dealing with complex PTSD. I didn't even know it at the time. So it's really sad. And I've had other Indian friends who get all kinds of other addictions, like drinking is a big one. I think, you know, especially if you're in a repressed environment growing up, and a lot of men don't know how to express their emotions or process it so that the anxiety reduces. So drinking becomes an easy way to just get out of that. Workaholism is a big one because we're so in that like competitive mindset. We become workaholics and we lose ourselves chasing careers that aren't in line with who we are and being around people that we don't want to be with. And then a lot of chasing women, of course. So a big thing I want to talk about is the dating dysfunction, because we're so torn between these ideals that have been placed on us from the outside and haven't had enough nurturance of our true self that we end up having serious problems in dating, and it continues to hurt our self-esteem. We don't know how to relate authentically often. So in college, I spent a lot of time thinking about like going on dates, like how am I going to meet women? Because I was so shy and I had no idea how to do it. I really used dating apps a lot. It was honestly kind of an addiction at a certain point. Like I would like think about it during class, wouldn't be able to focus. I luckily stopped using them after I realized like these are just making me miserable. And then I had a hard time maintaining friendships with women, which is one of the saddest things because I was overthinking like, oh, does she like me? Like, what if I do this? Like, oh, like if I appear like this kind of guy, maybe she'll like me. Like I would write journal entries and trying to figure it out. And it was really, I just didn't believe in myself. Like I didn't really think I had anything to offer, which I've learned is not the case through a lot of introspection and therapy. But it's unfortunate how much pain I went through regarding dating. And then I also compared myself to other guys, as we talked about. Like guys compare themselves a lot, and the worst part was comparing myself to these dark triad personalities. There were a couple of people who were really malignant, who I was friends with during college. One later turned out to be very anti-Semitic. Once I learned that, I was like, oh my God, like this is not where I want to go. Another guy was an Indian guy. He was a womanizer, and you know, initially I was friends with him, but then I took some time off to work on a medical device, and what I ended up learning was that this is actually not as sad. Like I remember talking to him afterwards, and I was like, he's a very shallow person. I really don't want to be around him. And then even outside of those dark triad personalities, it's just constant comparison to other guys who were more successful, especially with respect to dating. Like I would just think about, oh, okay, because he's an investment banker, people will probably like him more or something. It was really hard, and I've luckily learned a lot. So before I talk about how like the recovery from all of this, I want to also touch on some of the downstream effects societally that don't just affect us as men personally, but affect other groups. So the biggest thing is that because we aren't in touch with our true selves and we don't have that authentic self-esteem and we're trying to match up to some external image, we have to push other people down, and that's a really unfortunate thing. And I think it happens to women a lot. You know, if you haven't had experience relating to women in a healthy way, unfortunately, you start developing all these like weird ideas. If you I don't know how many Indian parents follow internet culture, but there's this whole incel culture. These men who just don't have any interactions with women, they start developing all these like weird theories about like what it means to be a woman, and it's really just an echo chamber because they don't actually talk to anybody. One of the best things I did during college in my sophomore year was I was like, I'm just gonna forget about dating and I'm just gonna maintain healthy friendships and really just learn what dating is like from their perspective. And I learned a lot about how like women really need to feel safe around a man, and like the biggest threat to a woman is a man. And I've learned, as time goes, I've learned about how, in Indian culture, especially, it's a patriarchal culture, especially back in India, the country itself, and how that ends up affecting women downstream, and like how that can hurt self-esteem. So that's something I've tried to be cognizant of. There's also a big LGBT phobia thing, especially amongst men. Unfortunately, the biggest slur that I heard during grade school was fag. Um, it's a really hurtful word, and we would just toss it around like nothing. But the reality is that there are LGBT people out there, especially within the Indian community, and that's already something that's not very much discussed within the Indian community. But there are LGBT kids, and we do have to support them. There's nothing wrong with them, and they're deserving of love just like every other person. But this LGBT phobia that men might have because they don't want to be called gay leads to like you can't even give hugs. It's crazy. Like men don't give hugs and like aren't as expressive about like appreciation of other men because you don't want to have that vulnerability. Um, I really It's really sad. I'm lucky to have friends who are like very willing to give hugs and stuff, but um it's sad, we're men, like, yeah, sure, but we also need that affection, and it's crazy. Like, I don't understand why we like to shell ourselves off. That's that avoidant attachment style. We like to pretend that there's no attachment at all, but the reality is we're social creatures. I was once a small boy and I wanted my mother, and honestly, I'm still that small boy often, and I've had to learn to like give myself that love. And at the core of this is a lack of empathy for men. Like, when we do this to ourselves, when we detach from our emotions, we're not even able to show other men emotions. Other men, sorry, other men compassion. We don't show ourselves compassion. Therefore, if somebody else is crying, we're just like, oh, he's a weakling. It's stupid. Um, it makes me very angry. And I've had such an issue with this myself because I've had to learn to show myself emotion, empathy, and compassion over time with the complex PTSD. But I was really not compassionate with myself. And I think during the first few years of college, I was probably, I was kind of mean. And I've actually gone back and apologized to some of the people that I've hurt. But it's unfortunate because I meet a lot of men who just really beat themselves up, and they won't even share it because they're just we try and suck it up. We're constantly ranking ourselves against other men, and it's like, oh, if we show that we have a weakness, then we'll go down on this ranking system. Women might not be interested in us or something. And this lack of compassion for ourselves also goes to other groups. I think I have a belief that a lot of very conservative people, especially very conservative men, are dismissive of minority issues because they show themselves such little empathy, and they really only value themselves on, frankly, these narcissistic measures. So far I've painted a pretty bleak picture of what it means to be an Indian man in the States. And I think there's a lot of, I honestly feel like masculinity in this country is in some ways imploding. And unfortunately, there haven't been many good options. There are people who vilify men left and right. And I really don't think that's the way to go. But on the other hand, you have these snake oil salesmen coming out of the woodworks, people like Jordan B. Peterson. I'm not saying everything he does is bad, but I really don't think he's the best example. you have a lot of these disenfranchised men turning towards the conservative parties and some like pretty extreme groups. And it's, what do we do? And I didn't know what to do. And I think through my recovery, I've figured out some notion of what we can do as men. And that really comes down to self-direction and understanding who we truly are and really introspecting and taking a critical eye to what we consider ourselves to be. Did you want to chime in, Dr. Jane?
I'm going to step in. I want you to continue to finish the story, and then I have a few things, but I'll say it after you finish. Please continue.
Okay, sounds good. So what had to happen for me to recover from complex PTSD is really recovering from a lot of the like unhealthy personality traits that I'd developed, and really understanding what it means to be me. Like, who was I as a little boy, and how will I nurture him? Because that little boy has so many wonderful things to provide as a man. And I'll show you a picture of myself when I was little, and I'll give you a portrait of who I was and who I am.
If I just may ask you a question here, which I think which will provide a lot of clarity to our audience here, was the little boy that you were and you've become into a man. If you were to, oh my God, that's so dope.
Yeah, that was me. That was me smiling as a maybe 3-year-old. I remember from pictures between 10 to 18, I never smiled in pictures, and I've reclaimed that smile because I've reclaimed who I am.
That's very brave, Shim. That's very brave. Every time I hear your story, I just want to applaud you.
Thank you.
So here is what I'm going to ask you, is for the clarity of our audience, what is it that the parents out here can do to provide a safe home for their children so they don't go through and they don't hide behind all of their emotions? That's my one question.
Mm-hmm.
And my second question being, what can children do?
Yeah.
Growing up, to ask their parents to be more, so that they can feel seen and heard. Because I think the problem stems from not being seen and heard.
Yeah, so I'll talk a bit about what we can do to support the kids at home. And it really comes down to nurturing the true self and mirroring their emotions and supporting their individual goals. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I touched on before that I want to harp on again is the sexual shame. It's just not talked about within Indian families.
Yes.
And I think that leads to so much dysfunction. And one thing I've noticed amongst these cultures that are very puritanical is because there's so much shame around sex, they tend to blame the women for it. Like, women are like temptresses and whatnot. And you can see this with like a lot of, I guess, the Republican Christian right, that they'll really attack women, and, you know, the attack on abortions and sexual freedom. And it's really bad for women. I don't know how to, it's also bad for men, but it sucks for women. So there needs to be more of an openness. Like, we're organisms. We reproduce sexually. Like, it's not, there's nothing really to be ashamed of it. It's just a biological thing. The shame aspect comes from a lot of cultural conditioning, and we do need to be open about it with kids. And I think another thing is that dating is just a reality amongst the younger generation once they get to middle and high school. I wasn't allowed to date. I just wasn't even allowed to talk to women. My parents, they went through my phone. They would try and make sure I wasn't talking to any girls. Don't do that. It really doesn't work well.
And I think I'm super passionate about this topic, so I'm going to step in over here. And I have a book coming out next month which goes into detail about all of this. But my urge to all the parents listening to this webinar, thank you, Shivam, for bringing this to everybody's attention. But if you want, I think everybody's struggle as an Indian parent or any other parent is their primary problem is my child doesn't communicate with me. If we don't talk about these topics that Shivam is talking about openly to our children are going to run away. Remember, the first thing that they look for when they talk to you is your reaction, is how are you reacting to a particular thing that they're saying? And then their next steps are based on that reaction. So be very careful on how you react to them. That's one. And if we're not talking about these issues, it's not like you're taking the issue away from the child. The child is still talking about the issue. He's just not talking to you about the issue, but he is going outside and talking to somebody else. So if you want your child to communicate with you, then you have to put all these things out in the open. And if you can't do it yourself, you get some help, get a mediator, take the child to a therapist. But this is something that needs to be talked about if you want your child to grow in a very hard world, like Shivam points out. In this country, it is super tough as an Indian kid. So thank you, Shivam, for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a really good idea to get external help, especially in things where you might not be an expert at. And that's okay, like not everybody's, we're not the Buddha, all of us, like we're gonna have some hangups, and that reaction, how you react really does influence like whether they feel safe in bringing stuff up.
Yes.
I didn't feel safe at all.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is safe. They need to feel safe. And again, one thing I'm going to point out is there is this big stigma about mental health in the Indian community. If you don't want to take your child to therapy, okay, perfect. That's okay. You don't want to tell the world that your child is going to a therapist, okay, go to a life coach. If you go to a life coach, there is nothing wrong with your child. Your child just needs a little bit of push, a little bit of support. That's all your child needs. So we need to get away from this mental health to be treated as a stigma. Mental health or a therapist is just like going to another doctor. It's not like you're crazy or you're mad. I think every human being should go to therapy only because it allows you to process your emotions. And because teenagers and college students have so much to do and they don't know their emotions because their mind fully develops only at 25, it helps when they go to a therapist or a life coach because they're able to find that safe environment where they can speak about their emotions without being judged. So,
Yeah.
and until we remove mental health as a stigma, we're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah. I think a big thing that we can do to support Indian boys is the dads can spend time with the boys, and one of the, try and open up. You don't have to be perfect, but even the little bits, like those are really the moments I cherish the most with my dad. He's like a provider and stuff. He was great on that front. He wasn't very emotionally there because he was stressed and he had his own challenges, but there were a few times he would really try and open up to me. Those are really the moments that stuck with me. So if you're a dad, like play with your son, and really let your guard down every now and then. I think your son will really appreciate it. And at the end of
form a routine, like maybe on a Sunday, go out for a meal or go out for a coffee or go out for a boba tea or whatever the child likes. And just maybe 15 minutes, because you set those 15 minutes maybe every Sunday or Saturday or whenever your schedule allows, your child is going to look forward to it and you're going to carry that. And when he grows up, he's going to turn around and say, like Shivam, he's going to turn around and say, you know what, me and my dad used to go for those 15 minutes and those 15 minutes were just for the two of us. And we just spoke about random things, and maybe you don't speak about anything, and that's okay too, but the child will feel safe.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you're getting to know your kid, and that's how they develop their identity. You don't want to project who you are onto them, which happened to me, but you want to get to know them. They're these wonderful beings. They have all these likes, desires, and wants, and mirror that back to them. If your boy says that he likes nail paint, let him like the nail paint, like it's okay. Maybe you might be scared that he's girly, but I think that freedom that children have, it's so beautiful and unfortunately gets lost.
Nail paint with him. You'll find it odd for a second and then it's just going to be the fun thing to do together, right?
Yeah.
Do you think, Shivam?
Yeah. If you're already, grown up, and this is a question that you struggle with, and I think a lot of Indian men struggle with this. So many of my friends struggle with this. I have some notions of like how I've recovered, and some suggestions. And the big things that have helped me recover are therapy, specifically EMDR for the complex PTSD. I also practice meditation. I try and meditate 20 minutes twice a day. I've gone through workbooks to help me learn how to manage triggers, deal with anxiety and whatnot. So there are a wide variety of books that you can read. And then one thing I really like is 12-step groups. I go to adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families, and we've actually started one of the first ever Indian-oriented adult children of alcoholics groups, and it's been really great. I can really share my experience there, and the nice thing is you get this time where you can share whatever you want for a few minutes, and nobody will judge or respond. So you can just share something that's on your mind, and that's been a lifesaver for me. I can just, talk about random stuff on my mind. I think a nice thing is that I also connect with people who, like one of my friends from there, he's a bisexual man, and I get to learn what it's like to be a man from him as well. And I actually, one of the big things that's really helped me is like speaking to LGBT people about what their experiences are like and seeing if I can relate to them. And it's hard, it's hard, but it's actually been it's been very good for me. Especially like learning. When I was kind of a bit closed-minded during high school, and I've grown more open-minded over time. And I have, like, one of my closest friends is a bisexual man, and I've learned a lot just from his dating experiences. So what it really comes down to is you take in this information, you see your reactions, like what parts of your body tense up, what thoughts go through your head. You can journal them. And at the end of the day, you get to decide, do I stand for this? Do I not stand for this? Do I want to obsessively chase women? Is that something I stand for? Is that a value of mine? And for me, I answered no. Like, I'm very happily in a relationship, and I really believe in, supporting my partner and building something beautiful with her. And that's something I've decided it means to be a man for me. And there are a lot of other guys who are out there chasing women, and I've given that up, but I'm happy. And here are some, like, I've got an idea of what it means to be a man for me, but that might mean something different for somebody else. For example, like, I'm like a generally more sensitive person. I'm more introverted. So there's a specific way my masculinity kind of shows up in my life. But I have some suggestions. And these are based on what the popular ideas are of being a man, and some suggestions for something healthier. What if we could go from defensiveness to introspection and growth? We could take in other ideas and at least consider the possibility and really mull them over. What if we can go from domination to collaboration? We don't need to dominate other people. In fact, it's better if we get a bunch of different people with different ideas who can specialize in their own things and build something better together. What if we could go from self-absorption and self-aggrandization to contribution to society? Instead of trying to amass a ton of wealth for yourself, trying to show off how cool you are, we could build something cool that other people can enjoy, and everybody could live in happiness instead of trying to put down other people and just puff ourselves up. What if we could go from narcissism to acceptance of others? Instead of believing that we're better than everybody else, we can just say, you know what, other people are not a threat to our ego, and I'm gonna strive to accept other people as they are. And finally, what if we could go from control to guidance? I think one of my favorite shows is Avatar: The Last Airbender, and one of my favorite characters from that show is Uncle Iroh, and he really puts it well in terms of he guides his nephew, who was banished and is deeply abused, into becoming a healthy man. And throughout the show, Iroh never tries to puff himself up. He's just focused on guiding the younger generation. And I think that's what it comes down to. I think as men, we can guide younger men into forming healthier relationships and really like coming through with their dreams, like how to actually build that up. And we don't have to hurt other people. We're all born with a beautiful heart, and a lot of us are hurting. Nobody is permanently damaged. There's a way out of this, and this is what I've learned. Thank you for letting me share today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Shivam. Thanks for sharing your experience, and thanks, Sonati. We will go to the question and answers. But for those who have not been familiar with our system, there is a tab called chat questions. you can type in your questions so that we can ask on your behalf to Shivam and Dr. Jain. The one I have is, I have a son faced just like Shivam, who is 23 now, still struggling. I have been looking for a life coach who understands him. If anyone could help, extend a help, it would be really appreciated.
Sure. I'll just put in my details here.
Yeah, Dr. Jain is fantastic.
Yeah.
And actually, there's this guy I've been watching recently called The Healthy Gamer. He's a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, and I'm somebody who plays video games, but I really like listening to him, and maybe your son will like him. He's pretty approachable, and he has a YouTube channel. So yeah, I can. It's health. You can type in Alok Kanodia or Healthy Gamer. If you type in either of those two, that might be an option, and I think a lot of guys would like him.
I don't think I can put this.
Okay.
I don't know if that went through this here. I don't know.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah. So
You can
Dr.
just put my
Jain,
name there. I'm sorry, I didn't put my name.
yeah, Dr. Jain has indicated that you can call her. Her number is 202-615-7739. And thank you, Dr. Jain, for doing this. And please ask your questions if you have any. But in the meantime, Dr. Jain, so you want to supplement anything or stress some of the points?
Yes, I think I can resonate with all of the things that Shivam has mentioned. And thank you, Shivam. Again, I can't thank you enough for bringing all of these things out, because in our Indian culture, it's just not very many people can stand up and talk about all of this. So very brave of you. And I think a whole lot of these things are rooted in culture. No parent wants anything bad for their child, consciously or unconsciously. But that being said, parents are carrying their own baggage, and parents that have their own life, and they struggle with a lot of things, which sometimes affect children. But it's never too late to make that change. Your child, as Shivam mentioned, the three things which are key to having healthy children is, one is they need to be seen and heard. That's big for them. Second, they need to feel safe. Third, they should not be judged. And I think we all struggle to do that as parents sometimes, only because, not because we love them any less, but I think it's just because life comes in the way and we're not that self-aware. So the more we go inward and the more we become self-aware and open that communication gap, which the generational divide that we're talking about, the more we're going to get closer to the child. So, and mental health, again, mental health is not a stigma. If you're actually getting your child help, you're being a very strong parent and you're doing yourself and your child a favor. It's not a stigma. If anybody, it's very rooted in Indian culture, especially boys, as Shivam mentioned. It's not necessary. I mean, being a man, to me, as Shivam said, everybody has their own definition, but being a man is not necessarily being macho and hiding your emotions. It's really being sensitive and being able to talk to people, express their emotions, take care of women, take care of each other, and that's really what a man is about. So if we want to really raise this, I'm sorry, so go ahead.
No, I think those are good things about there are also some like kind of things from more traditional masculinity that I think are good. Like, I think it's good to be able to have a value system and really be able to stand by that. Of course, you need to always be evolving your value system. But I think as I've grown as a person, I've really learned deep down what my values are, and I can really stand like a rock for that at times. So it's not just about being sensitive. Like, we're not just crying in a corner. I think this kind of
being sensitive, but I didn't.
No. Correct. I know you didn't mean that. I just think a lot of men get scared when they're hearing about this, because it's like, oh, am I going to be a sensitive man who's just like crying and emotional all the time? It's like, no, it's more you have that flexibility, but you've really thought things through because the emotions have guided you to something greater, and you can really stand up for that well. And you know, one thing I've realized is I need to stand up for people who might be going through trauma, or if I see something wrong, I'm gonna say something.
Thank you.
I'll stop there.
Thank you, Shivam. And the parent said he will contact Dr. Jain, but do you want to talk to them too? Because he wanted to know whether he can talk to you, the person we
I'm sorry.
talked before. The
I'm
person
sorry,
who
Desi. I can't read the questions, unfortunately. Say that again, Desi.
the parent who asked a question about his 23-year-old son is asking whether he can talk to Shivam also.
Absolutely, please.
What
He
is
can talk
his?
to whoever he wants.
Can you
Absolutely.
just put
That's
put
for
your
you.
contact info in the chat, Shivam? I'll send it to them, and
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
just in case. So that would be really nice if he can relate to you and then talk to you.
Yeah. I'm happy to help out.
There's a question. Next question is there a life coach for parents too as well?
Yes.
Or is it for the just children?
No, it's for both. It's for parents and for the children.
Okay. So yeah,
Let
we
me
need
just
help
go to
too.
my
Yeah.
Yes, the sessions go both. They have to complement each other. So the parents get to decide their own sessions and children get to decide their own sessions. So yes, the sessions are for both.
Okay. The next question is, when you were struggling with dating college, you mentioned that you stopped dating apps and decided to focus on yourself and your friendship. What specifically made your friendship flourish? Let me see.
Yeah, the best thing that happened was, I had reached a point where I was like, okay, I've like exhausted that whole other like stuff about dating from the guy's perspective, and I wanted more realistic, real relationships, more of that emotional connection. So what really helped was I made friends with women, and I'd ask them a lot of questions. And I would be pretty honest, like, I don't know much about what dating is like from a woman's perspective, and I want to learn. And I think that kind of honesty is refreshing for a lot of women, because there's a lot of guys who kind of go in with that ulterior motive. So it doesn't help. But yeah, I'd do that. And then I would try and read women's dating advice too, because there's a lot you can learn from that. And, you know, there's toxic stuff there about like playing games and whatnot, but there's also a lot of stuff about like keeping yourself safe. And I'm like, wow, okay, I never thought about that. So yeah,
I
would
think you
say,
made a very important point, Shivam, where you said the woman needs to feel safe.
yeah, the
think that's
safety
the
thing is
biggest.
huge, and it's not just physical safety; it's emotional safety as well. Like
Yes.
invalidation is something we don't really think much about, and we don't really think about in terms of safety. But like, if somebody tells you, "I don't feel heard," and then you're like, "What are you talking about? You don't feel heard. I'm listening to you right now." It's like that's an invalidation, and it really reduces that emotional safety. And unfortunately, men invalidate their own emotions a lot. So if you're gonna learn how to like help a woman feel safe, you gotta learn to validate your own emotions. So that's something I've learned to do.
You can't do anything for anybody else if you don't first do it for yourself. So just to keep that in mind.
Thank you. I just put out Shivam's contact info with his email, Shivam, SHIVAM dot GANDHA Gandhi @gmail. Okay. The next one is, thank you for speaking up, Shivam. It's very helpful for us parents. Would implore us as a community to put mental health emphasis on the same level as we would be preparing for Math B or Spelling Bee.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. So much more.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
Yeah.
if you think about it this way, like the math bee and the spelling bee, that's just some societal construct that we've made up. And you know what? It's fine. Everybody has their opinions. I personally don't like competition that much. I think it kills creativity. But that's just me. That's for me. I'm an individual I don't like competitions. But mental health, that's like a biological reality. Like you're getting like it is a biological reality that we attach to our caregivers, and then we have a society that we end up attaching to. It is so much more important than any of that. And you know what? What's the crazy part? I've gone through therapy, and it's helped me so much with my research. Like I've become such a better researcher. I feel so much smarter, and that's because I'm not anxious all the time. And I can console myself, and I'm a lot more resilient. So I would say mental health should be put on the same level as physical health, because in some ways it is, because your nervous system is a part of your body. So that's my answer to that.
Yeah. And actually, the parent continues saying that we do family meetings once a month where we parents go first, talking about our struggles, lows, and feelings, and then let the kids go next. This has helped us a lot, and for the kids to open up to us.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really awesome way to deal with that. So I'm really glad. This is
Yeah,
good.
yeah, keep it up. I wish I had that when I was younger.
Okay. The question I personally have is, you talked about Indian men and Indian boys. Is it unique to Indians, you think, or it could be general?
There are a lot of men who have issues. That's across the board. Like I really believe masculinity in the United States is imploding. But I think it's especially harder for Indian guys because we are very conscious of the fact that we're like a lot of people don't like Indian men, and it does form a complex. And then culturally, since we live in such a sexually closed off society, it can cause a lot of issues too. So I think I don't want to turn it into like some sort of like the victim Olympics, like, oh, Indian men have it the hardest, but there are some problems that like Indian men really struggle with, and I've seen much more frequently with Indian men.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'll spread a little bit of a tweak on here and put a wider net. I think it's a little bit with the developing nations. Even with the African American men, I think they're all caged in a, just like Indians are. I would spread that net a little bit wider.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know anything about that group. So
yeah, because I have a lot of developing nations people, so they struggle with the same issues, who come with exactly the same issue as the Indians. So yes.
Okay. Thank you. And this is another interesting question. How can parents find out their kids are being bullied at school? What can they do about it?
So I'm gonna say it's I don't have an answer for you off the top of my head, because bullying, when you're bullied, it's a very shameful thing actually. You're like, oh my God, I don't want to let anybody know that I'm being bullied. Um, it's really sad, but there's a lot of shame attached to it about being bullied, and it's something I struggle with too, even now. Like, oh, I've been bullied in the past. Like, I don't want to share that. How can you figure it out? I think having that safe environment at home is the most important thing for sure, where they can actually share that such a thing is happening. Because and you have to let them come to you with it. Because there's that shame aspect. If you try and pry into it, they're gonna close up. They're gonna be like a turtle. They're gonna go back into their shell. So if you have that safety, that's great. Another sign is if they're like, if you notice that they don't have too many friends, or if they're unusually aggressive. Bullying, unfortunately, a lot of people who get bullied also become bullies. And like, I hurt people in grade school. I bullied a couple kids. It's unfortunate. I have apologized to them, but I was an angry, aggressive person, and I took it out on other people. So
if I may add to that, a few of the signs would be, if the child is playing excessive video games, there could be a problem that they're hiding from some of their emotions. That could be another sign. If they are defying you or aggressive, as Shivam said, just acting up and defying you for no reason and just being angry around you, that could be another way of figuring out. If they are locked up in their rooms and they're struggling with getting out of bed, then that could be another sign that they're doing that. If they're excessively eating junk food, then they're hiding from some bit of emotion. Those are some of the things. And of course, if they don't have friends, and if they refuse to go, they just refuse to go out because they just don't feel good about themselves. So you'll feel like they struggle with self-esteem when they go out with you. They won't be able to talk to people. They won't be able to talk to similar, like you go out in an Indian household and they're the other friends who are of same age, they won't be able to communicate with them. All of these are signs that there's something wrong. Bullying is one aspect, but other than that, there's definitely something else which can be an alarming sign.
Yeah, those are also really good points.
Thank you. And I don't have any more questions coming in. So can you wrap up with the final tips or advices, Shivam?
Yeah, think about the pressures that you have from family and society, and just take a critical eye. Like, does this really feel like me? Why am I doing this? And is it because, like, especially for men, like, is it because I want to feel like a man? And then ask yourself, well, what would happen if I stopped doing this? And find the courage and find the support where you can keep asking those questions and keep getting to the truth of who you are. And I think if you do that, you're on a good path.
Thank you. Dr. Jain?
Just be you and don't try and fit in. And for parents, I think just making sure that your child is seen and heard, and small things matter, like keep your phone away when the child is communicating with you. Just make them feel heard, make them feel safe. This concept that children don't want to communicate with their parents there is a reason behind it. I think getting back to that reason of no judgment, no comparisons, we're very quick to jump in and solve a child's issue. Let's take a step back, and if we hear the child more and let them come to their own solutions, then they will be able to come back to us because they're feeling heard. We're not jumping in to solve their problem, but they want that mental space to come back and talk to you. But we have to give that mental space, and that mental space can only be given if we hear more than we speak.
Thank you. Thank you all for attending this session, and I hope you found this very interesting and informative and useful. I thank Shivam for his time, courage, and his patience with us, as well as educating us on this important topic. And I would like to thank Dr. Jain for her views on all these topics, and she's ready to help you out in case you need. Both of them will be really ready to help you guys out. We would like to continue talking about this intergenerational topic, more webinars, workshops, or talks, and we would like your participation also, input and support for this topic. Please do help us out, and then by contacting at the webinars at the artsout.org. We'll try to bring another session soon. Our plan is to talk about this quite often, at least once a quarter. Our regional contests are just around the corner, and our chapters are working hard to secure a venue, finalize the dates, and bring you the contest, this time in person instead of online like we used to do it before. Please stay tuned for their announcements. Also, as we do every year from January to March, we are also working on bringing you the Meet the Pro type of sessions with some successful champions in various subjects who would share their tips with preparing for the contest. Please watch for our communications, and please register and attend. This is going to be the last session of this year. I thank every one of you for your patronage and then helping us out and encouraging us to do more.